welcome. Welcome into the television version of Strategies for Living. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. I'm delighted that you've tuned in and joined with me today on Strategies for Living, where we're all about helping us live healthier, happier, more peaceful lives in our bodies, in our minds, in our spirits, in our relationships here in the 21st century. And we do that by engaging in important conversations with folks we like to call life strategists each and every time that we do Strategies for Living. And I got to tell you, I've been looking forward to today's life strategist because, you know, what's rung in my ears, Ernie Robinson, since you and I talked was, go west, young man. Go west. And Ernie Robertson is a graduate of Louisiana Tech University. You and I probably know him. He's been forever the Caddo Parish Registrar of Voters. How many years have you done that?
Almost 24.
24 years. But what I didn't know until I picked up, and I feel like it was a treasure, Lost Shreveport, Gary Joyner and Ernie Robertson. And boy, did I learn some things in this book. So thank you for coming to Strategies for Living and being our life strategist today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So the western expansion of the United States created this incredible need, Ernie, for towns along the waterways at intersections that had existing streets and trails, particularly in the 1830s and 1840s. And Shreveport, Louisiana became a success story.
It really did. There were a couple of things that happened. Number one was we already had transportation.
Right.
You could get here by water.
Right.
And the water would actually wind up going all the way up, really up into Oklahoma from this area, but definitely into East Texas and then all the way down to New Orleans, which was the main port because of the Mississippi. So that helped. The second thing was we were already a major Indian trade route, and an Indian route from the standpoint of being able to have dialogue with other tribes, and this was a peaceful area. Mm-hmm. This was not a
Caddo
warring
Indians were mainly in this area, right?
Yeah, the Caddos were here, and they were mainly people who had already settled. They had villages, and so whenever the Europeans arrived, it made a little different environment, and so things got hopping pretty quick. And we were the jumping off place, of course, for Texas.
I learned things that I didn't know. When the town was incorporated in 1839, I learned this first from Lost Shreveport. I didn't know we were the westernmost municipality in the United States for a little while.
We were.
That didn't last too long, but for a little while, Shreveport was it. I mean, it was kind of like, I guess, the answer to today's LA or something. I don't know.
It really was. We wound up being on the edge of Texas, which was, basically its own nation at that time.
Right.
And so therefore, people that were coming here, and they were either stopping here, they were going northward, they were going not particularly to the Indian Territory, but they might be going to Arkansas, or they might be on the edge of Texas because that was still safe at that time. And so you would have people that literally, this was the frontier. And the key of us being the frontier is it influenced not only our ability to develop, but also our role in the Civil War and our role in Reconstruction and thereafter, whenever the frontier in the 1870s and 80s really began to be where it was happening.
Where it was happening and where everything opened up from.
That's right.
And Shreveport was the town. Now, we began as Shrevetown, right?
That's right.
I had heard that sometime in the past. Mm-hmm. This wasn't the first time in Lost Shreveport that I heard that, but it rang a bell for me. 1 square mile. It was diamond. We had a diamond-shaped downtown, mm-hmm. and if you had a map from back then, you would recognize some of the streets, wouldn't you?
Basically, you'd see those first 8x8 blocks, and you'd be able to tell the street names and be able to tell where you were as to where we are now.
Right.
And a lot of that really, even though the buildings have changed, there are enough recognizable landmarks where you can say, okay, that's still here, that's still there, because we still have a riverfront.
Yeah.
A lot of towns don't have a riverfront anymore.
And in my lifetime, I've seen that riverfront. I can remember as a little boy, there just wasn't much happening on the Red River. And my mother would tell me we lived fairly close And when I got on up into late elementary school where I could get on my bicycle in Bossier City, I could ride to the edge of the Red River, but it didn't look at all then, and this is mid 60s, by the time I was on my bicycle and riding, didn't look at all back then like it looks today. It's been an incredible change.
It was really kind of a low-income area, almost a shanty town in some places.
Oh, yeah.
Remnants of the old cotton compress area,
Yep.
and the area where there was docking of steamboats back into all the way up to the edge of the 20s, and but all of that would begin to go away, and whenever we're in the 50s and into the 60s, and that's whenever they saw the idea of redeveloping the riverfront.
Right, and look what it is today, and we've only really just begun, I would imagine.
I think there's probably going to be some more development we're going to see.
Captain Henry Miller Shreve, who of course Shreveport is named for, got a contract with the U.S. Army to remove this giant log jam that was jamming everything up. They called it the Great Raft, right?
That's correct.
And he never lived here.
No.
He never got to live, but he spent a lot of time in our area and was quite ingenious when it came to inventions to ram that log jam out and break that log jam, and he was able to do it.
He was, and that particular log jam actually had started from trees floating all the way from literally where the Red River started, but also from trees from Arkansas and everywhere else that were floating down the river. And his job in breaking through that wound up being the basis in a lot of ways for what would become later on quite common whenever it comes to snag boats and everything else that they
He
used.
wasn't in his lifetime, and he left here not totally, so the Corps of Engineers came in after him and really did the job that he started, right?
That's correct.
Okay, but we've got to give credit where credit is due to Captain Shreve. One of the things that I learned in your book that I was not aware of, and Texas Street, Crockett Street, Travis Street, Fannin Street, Milam Street, you mentioned it a few minutes ago. Texas was, of course, just up the road. Texas was its own country
Right.
when Shreveport was founded. All of those street names, if you think about it, the Alamo had happened not long before the founding of Shreveport. So all of those street names, Texas, Crockett, Travis, those were all Texas names, weren't they?
They were, and they were the heroes, really, of the Alamo in a
Yeah,
lot of cases.
right.
And so we wound up kind of like Texas did with naming. They named major towns after their heroes, and we named the streets in Shreveport after those heroes. And of course, in a lot of instances, we were influenced even then by Texas. Like people still say, well, we kind of want to be a smaller version of Dallas. Well, we still have that influence. We have more of an East Texas influence than we do South Louisiana, let's say. And so therefore, we wound up naming our streets after there. But the real key, and what people need to remember, is that Texas Street originally was the Texas Road.
That was the road, if you got
That's
on
right.
it led you to Texas.
It led you to Texas.
Made
and
sense.
It was the commerce stream for people coming from Texas, coming to Shreveport, and vice versa. It was wound up being where everything happened, and so therefore, when Highway 80 came along, where was it placed? It was placed right where the
Right there.
Texas Road was.
Now, you co-wrote Lost Shreveport with Gary Joyner.
That's correct.
Dr. Gary Joyner, from professor of history out at LSU Shreveport. How was this book long in the making? How did Lost Shreveport come to be, Ernie?
Well, Gary and I met when he did reapportionment for the Cattle Commission back in 1990. And so that's how we met. And then through the years, we found out we had a lot of similar interest in history. But my interest more is in finding history, finding items of old Shreveport's history, whether it's a program from the Grand Opera House or some other type of maybe a portrait or something that relates to Shreveport's history. And so through the years, he would be looking for things and I would have something that would help him. And he said, one day we ought to write a book. And then this series came from History Press. They were looking for towns that wanted to have in the Lost series and focus in on, but in our particular case, around 1900 to 1915.
This may be an unfair question for a guy like you, because I'm looking through the book, and folks, you got to get this book. It's worth the price of the book just to get Ernie Robertson's collection. And I'm looking through here, and your collection is heavy in here. So this may be an unfair question, and if it is, I apologize ahead of time to you, Ernie. But what's the biggest find? What's the biggest? What do you consider? Because you just said that that's what you do. What's the biggest aha that it may or may not be in the book, but.
Well, this one in the book, it's the 1904 album of facts, and it winds up being a lot of the photos in here. And it actually was something I have found out through the years that actually was produced in a lot of major cities, and they would have everything in there about their town, and all the photos were taken around 1900. And a lot of the photos that we see today are actually on old postcards, because they were all taken in the 1900 to 1910 period.
Yeah, and postcards were massive back
they were.
then, apparently.
There were thousands of postcards produced, and that's one of my hobbies, is collecting them, strictly for, really, to be honest with you, for historical reasons, and trying to identify the buildings or something odd about them.
We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to dive into some of, you cover a lot of ground here, from the Louisiana State Fair to the Red Light District. So let's start there when we come back. Can we? Ernie Robertson, our life strategist today. We are learning all about Lost Shreveport. That's the name of the book from he and Dr. Gary Joyner, and we've got more with Ernie Robertson, our life strategist today here on Strategies for Living. Stay with us.
Hey.
Ready to go?
Yeah, but the fire's not out.
Close enough.
Close enough? If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. I mean, the next thing you know, you've torched our whole neighborhood.
Which is why we're not going anywhere?
Exactly. 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Storms come up fast. Storm Protect Your Family now. We want you to know a safe room or storm shelter can provide the highest protection for your family during tornadoes and other severe windstorms. To learn more about how you can protect your family and property from storms, visit getagameplan.org and click on Mitigation Plan. Louisiana, we can do this. This mitigation message brought to you by the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness.
Whether you're enjoying an ATV, all-terrain vehicle, or an ROV, recreational off-highway vehicle, safety can be as simple as ABC. A. Always wear a proper helmet, eye protection, gloves, long sleeves and pants, sturdy boots, and in an ROV, the seatbelt. B. Ride sober and only on designated trails. C. Get safety trained through the ATV Safety Institute, atvsafety.org, or the Recreational Off-Highway Vehicle Association, rohva.org.
I never should have clicked on that link. It promised to unlock the secret of male enhancement, but it didn't. All it did was brag to my entire friend list that I had found a cure for the average male and that they should try it too. You know, once you spam your mom with a message telling her to increase the size of her manhood, family dinners have been a little weird.
One of my biggest passions in life is animals. That's why I've worked with Morris Animal Foundation for over 40 years. Morris Animal Foundation is a world leader in helping animals live longer, healthier lives. You can too. Just show your support at morrisanimalfoundation.org.
To help cats, dogs, horses, and wildlife live healthier lives, visit morrisanimalfoundation.org, where we are advancing science that will create a healthier tomorrow for animals.
At what age is the color that your skin was meant to be no longer beautiful? Every year, millions of young women try to change the skin they were born with and say they die for darker skin. Sadly, some actually do. Melanoma is the second most common cancer in teens and young adults, and one person dies from melanoma every hour. Change your thinking, not your skin. Stop tanning. Learn more at spotskincancer.org. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. You're watching, of course, the television version of Strategies for Living. But don't forget, Strategies started on the radio, News Radio 710 Keel. A little bit of history here, Ernie. Back in 1992. Boy, I have to stop and think about this because it's been 20 plus years we've been on the radio. Went into practice in 1991 and had been in the radio business before, so the bug hadn't quit biting me, and so I said, well, let's do a radio show, marrying what I'm doing now with what I used to do. So that's how Strategies for Living came to be, and then in conjunction with Bossier Parish Community College, the television version came to be, and so now we're in the Shreveport Times and here at Bipsy, and News Radio 710 Keel Sunday mornings, where it all started, 9:05 to 10. And you can also find us on strategiesforliving.com. But today, that's enough history about Strategies for Living. Today we're talking with Ernie Robertson about our history. We need to know where we came from, right?
And we have an interesting history too.
And we have a wonderful history, and you can read some of it here in Lost Shreveport. Now the book is out from the History Press, and you can find it at your favorite booksellers, wherever you buy books. Barnes & Noble has them. I know that Amazon.com has it. And a place called the Timeline Antiques on Stevenson, right over there by Byrd High School, happens to be another one of your loves, right? You have a couple of copies.
I had a few copies.
A few copies. Now, if I come into Timeline, will you autograph the book for me?
They will be autographed if they're out there.
Okay, good deal. So come visit Ernie Robertson. So you like all things old?
Anything old Shreveport is really my interest.
Okay, so I'd heard for years, Ernie, and you get into the book is divided up into several areas, starting with the beginnings, and we talked about that last segment. And then you get into things like the entertainment areas, Louisiana State Fair, but I'd heard for years that we had a red light district. And you can still see remnants of it in downtown Shreveport, can't you?
Well, actually, Millennium Studios built its studio right in the middle of it.
Right.
And it basically took up...
Was that where Annie McCune was?
That's where Annie McCune was, Nell Jester, Doc Selzer that ran the first... the big bar there that had the first illuminated sign in Shreveport.
Is that why the statue of Leadbelly is pointing down that way, Ernie?
Some say it is because he actually played down there.
I bet he did. Now, we also had, and I didn't realize, Talley's Opera House, and that was in the 200 block Milam Street, right? Street. And tell us about Talley's.
Well, Talley's, the actual building is still there, but it is Corby's and Nelson Insurance now, and the second floor was Talley's Opera House. And it was kind of an odd situation as far as performing goes. Guido Marburg tells the story that the stage did have some illumination, but out in front it was either candles or something to that effect, and it was generally kind of chilly up there, and there was only one set of stairs going up and down. And so it was small, but it was built for about 150 people. But that's how we got started in entertainment. And the building's still there, and one of the things across the street, you'll see the name Frankel on one of the buildings down there, and that's the name of our first Harley-Davidson dealer. He was in the bicycle business and then got into the motorcycle business when it first started, carried a number of different things, and he wound up in the Harley business.
Now, when I was general manager of KVKI, I was a supporter of bringing Mardi Gras back. I rode in that first parade because KVKI back then sponsored a float, and I loved it. I never had an experience like that. But that's the second time around I found out. I found out from your book, Mardi Gras was big here. 1899, 1900s?
1899.
I didn't know that. What was going on there?
We had a huge Mardi Gras, and it was kind of an unusual Mardi Gras because it was a North Louisiana version of it.
Right.
And we had like one of the floats was a cigar-shaped type, looks like an aerial ship, and it was like Shreveport Flyer be there. And then we also had the traveling men's crew. Those were sellers and drummers and all that. But the best name of a crew, that I've told this to a lot of folks, and they always get a laugh out of it, was we had a crew by the name of the Hoo Hoos.
The Hoo Hoos.
The Hoo Hoos. And so
we need to reform that crew.
it's a great name
the
for
crew
a
of Hoo Hoos.
The crew of Hoo Hoos. And the way our Mardi Gras worked was the king came up on a boat and he disembarked and he went and gathered up the crew and they went to a large restaurant and they had breakfast first.
Oh, wow.
And it was a whole day affair and they had the ball that night and they had a parade. And then that went on and kind of went out of favor about 15 years later. And then it came back. Mardi Gras came back in 25 to 27 and hung around for about 3 years. Then it went out of favor again, or whatever happened to it. And then comes back in the 80s.
Wonder if Prohibition had anything to do with that.
It may have. That was kind of in the middle of Prohibition.
Because one of the things that was, again, something that I learned from your book, I did not realize how big the brewing industry, you've got a whole section under businesses, and the brewing industry, Shreveport could have been maybe rivaling St. Louis.
Well, we were the Milwaukee of the South is
Yeah.
how we were referred to. We had 3 major breweries here. Adolphus Busch had an office here.
I did not know that until your book.
And you can still see a remnant of the building, the Deanna Produce Company.
Yeah.
Now that right there on Cross Bayou, that was part of the building there. And then we had another, we had the Shreveport Brewing Company that produced Shreveport Select. That's something I've been looking for years is a bottle.
A bottle from Shreveport.
Maybe that has that label on there, Shreveport Select.
Maybe you'll find that one
That's
day.
one I look for. And then the third one was
Wonder what
the
that
New
would
Orleans
be. Wonder what that would be worth.
It would be worth a lot to me.
It would be priceless to Ernie Robertson. So if anybody has one, it's priceless to Ernie Robertson. Wow.
I'd love to see one.
Louisiana State Fair. I didn't realize how deep it goes into our history. When I was a little boy, I still remember the old grandstands, and there used to be horse racing out there, car racing out there.
Automobile racing.
Yeah. And an occasional mule race?
We did have a mule race, and the only problem was the mules found, and this was when it was a mile track,
Right.
and the mules would get tired and they'd come out of turn 4 and they'd have to stop and take a break and go into the infield and eat some grass, and then the guy that was in last would come flying by, not flying on a mule, but he would go quickly by and win the race. But Barney Oldfield was the first person to race at the Louisiana State Fair,
Really?
along with Ben Kirshner. And Barney Oldfield was in a very famous race car known as the Blitzen Benz, the Prince Henry Blitzen Benz. And he was actually here. He was going to race an airplane, and the airplane actually crashed in the infield before he got here. They was doing some exhibitions.
Now, something that just absolutely blew me away was Booker T. Washington. I did not realize that Booker T. Washington had spoken here. And you've got pictures in the book, and it looks like everybody was out there.
Well, it was. He actually had 2 appearances in 1911. He was on the
not
Texas
one,
tour. 2. He was on his Texas tour in 1911. Though Shreveport's not listed as one of his stops, I've confirmed, not only from newspaper articles, but also from one of our locals whose grandfather was actually on the speaking podium with him. But on a 3-hour notice, they caught him leaving from Texarkana. He was going to be going back to Alabama. He had his own train car. They brought him here. 3,000 people show up. And
So
he's
it must
introduced.
have just been word of mouth.
It's word
quickly.
of mouth.
Yeah.
And he's introduced. It's a great story of redemption by Judge Thomas Fletcher Bell, who had been part of those who were strict Reconstructionists from the standpoint of redeemers, not reconstructionists, strict redeemers. And this was in 1911. He had been a judge for some time, always believed in fairness. You can see that in his reports and such. But he actually introduced Booker T. Washington, and his picture is in the book with his back to the camera. And they're shooting across, and Washington speaking, and in the background is the Caddo Abstract Building, which is where the Ward Building's built, and that's where our
That's
office is.
where your office is.
Yeah.
The book, you dedicated the book to Peter Urey. Of course, you know, we all know Urey Drive.
Right.
Arguably now the center of commerce in Shreveport. Urey was about commerce, right?
Urey was about commerce, and he was, of course, really the founder of Commercial National Bank. And he also was involved in the first streetcar companies.
Really?
In Shreveport. Not the first, but he bought the franchise of one that went out what we know as Fairfield Avenue.
Right.
It was actually a mule-drawn streetcar, and it was Norris Ferry Road at those times.
Wow.
So.
Wow. Okay. You cover so much in here, and it's amazing that you can do this in under 150 pages, Ernie. This must have been fun for you and Gary to
It was a
work
lot
on.
of fun. It was a lot of fun to write the book.
Did you have did you guys argue of this needs to be in, no, this needs to be in? Did you guys,
Not really. I mean, it was kind of freewheeling between us. We picked what we wanted to write about and started writing about it, and really it kind of started writing itself because I knew we wanted to get into entertainment, we wanted to get into auto racing and the stories at the state fair, and a lot of the pictures really tell a story because
there's some beautiful color pictures in the book that we don't do them justice here, holding them up to the television camera. But you got to get this book. So many of these, like you said, are from old postcards. And what's amazing to me as I go through here is how much I know and how much I recognize. My only complaint to you is that our time goes far too quickly. So I want to do a couple of things. I want to invite our viewers to go get a copy of Lost Shreveport. You can pick it up at Barnes & Noble. You can go to Timeline Antiques on the corner of Line Avenue and Stevenson.
That's correct.
And pick up a copy, and you can, if you get lucky, you'll even get an autographed copy.
That's right.
From Ernie Robertson. But definitely go get this book because, why are you our life strategist today? Because we need to know where we've been so we know where we are today and where we're going in the future, right?
That's true, and I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. I hope you'll come back.
I will do it.
All right, folks, and I hope, as always, you'll come back. Don't forget, you can find us on the World Wide Web, www.strategiesforliving.com. Until next time, for Ernie Robertson, I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. See you next time here on Strategies for Living.